Where Do You Get the Dress? By Authy Lazarus, aka Sue Nightbird X, a Batman, Red Robin, and Young Justice fanfic, rated for general audiences, with additional tags for queer themes, trans femme Connell, Connor Kent-centric, supportive significant other Tim Drake, emotional hurt comfort, mostly fluff, identity porn, I guess? Other characters mentioned, trans female character, author is transgender. Summary. Con turned again, this time to just feel the skirts sway. He smiled as the fabric bobbed. Then he turned again, faster this time, twirling with a giddy laugh. Or, Con discovers the euphoria of wearing skirts/dresses. Skirt go spinny. Tim saw it was coming. He saw it in the way Con's eyes always strayed to the women's department when they went shopping together. He saw it in the way Con never made fun of anyone for liking the color pink or purple, regardless of their gender. He saw it in the way Con sometimes let his mask drop in front of the mirror, his cocky attitude melting and revealing something sweet but sad underneath. He saw it in the way Con yearned. Tim knew he was yearning for something he didn't know how to want. Something he didn't understand. And he wanted to help. But just because he saw it coming, didn't mean he knew what to do about it. Tim was out of his depth, watching his boyfriend drown in a depression he'd fought for so long, and he was gasping for breath. Lips bubbling at the surface of the precipice of being fully submerged. Every desperate gulp of air could be his last, the last time oxygen filled his lungs rather than water. So Tim made an impulsive decision and an impulsive purchase, and prayed to whatever God would listen that it would work. Con flew home when he was tired. He liked to walk among the people, catch little bits of conversation as he walked by, and observe the uniqueness in every person. He liked to people watch, one could say, in the way that it made him feel normal, a feeling he rarely got to observe. But when he was tired and beaten and frustrated and exhausted and worn and overwhelmed and overworked, he flew home, high up into the clouds so that no one would see him, and he wouldn't see anyone, until he arrived at his little apartment that he rented for, initially, just himself. Then his teammates had started treating it like a clubhouse of sorts, for out-of-the-Cape hangouts. Many a good party had been swung there, and maybe too many bottles of vodka had been consumed. But when you had superhuman metabolisms, it was nigh impossible to get drunk. Sorry, Tim. But then, Young Justice had grown up and out, each of them flying the coop and leaving Con more or less alone, all except for Tim. Tim lived all the way over in Gotham, but somehow, Tim never left him. Even living in Metropolis, Con could count on coming home on the weekends to Tim lounging on the couch with his laptop open and the TV playing in the background. The apartment always smelled like coffee thanks to him, and Con found he didn't mind at all. In fact, he preferred it. The smell renewed each week, and Con spent Saturday and Sunday mornings feeling like he lived in a little cafe. He imagined that he and Tim lived in Italy, in a tall and skinny building, with a coffee shop underneath, and every morning he and Tim would get up and go to work in their little cafe, and after that they'd close up shop and go walk around town. They'd get lunch and talk and laugh, and Tim would smile at him with his gorgeous brown eyes, and the sun would be shining, and Tim would twirl him around in a white sundress, and... His fantasies were always too vivid, and so confusing. He hated them. He loved them. He wished they were real. He wished he was real. Con floated in through the window on a Wednesday afternoon, head hung low, knowing Tim wouldn't be by for another 3 days, an eternity to spend alone. He wished Tim could live with him. Or maybe he wished he could live with Tim. But he shouldn't want that. The smell of coffee stopped Con in his tracks. The kitchen had been used while he was gone. More significantly, the coffee machine. But the apartment remained empty. Odd. But Con smiled anyway. Even just the smell made him feel less alone. Like maybe Tim was just in the other room, taking a shower or working on his spreadsheets. Con wasn't supposed to love Tim this bad. He was pretty sure. But who else was he meant to love? Better question, who was meant to love him? Con dragged himself into his bedroom, essentially scruffing himself with his TTK. He dropped himself onto the bed and found that the covers had been washed and dried while he was gone. They smelled like fresh linens and lavender. Con breathed it in, the scent mingling with the coffee from the kitchen. Tears, real tears, that Con only ever let himself cry when alone, escaped him. He was smiling and crying at the same time, which was confusing. But his feelings were confusing too, because the smells reminded him of someone he loved. So it made him happy, but that someone he loved wasn't really there, so it made him sad. It wasn't until the golden hour was truly upon him that he noticed a faint glimmer in the corner of his eye. The closet door, he noticed, was slightly ajar. From inside, something was sparkling. Curiosity piqued, Con dragged himself out of bed and trudged over to the closet. Pulling the door open, however, his jaw dropped. The color green wasn't one he often considered, but looking at it now, he realized he should have. It complemented the tan tone of his skin so well, he had to believe the article was for him. But it couldn't be. That was absurd. Tim wouldn't. It was probably for some girl. Maybe Sissy? She looked good in green. The dress, for a dress it was likely the most beautiful bit of clothing he'd ever seen. It was long, with a boat neckline and soft bell sleeves. The whole thing was the color of spring, sage tied with juniper and basil, the scents hitting Con's mind as if he were truly in a field of rolling hills. He could imagine rows and rows of dandelions and daffodils, all swaying in the breeze like lazy dancers. He reached out and let the fabric sift over his fingers like fine sand, the silken material cold to the touch. A terrible thought occurred to him. An awful thought. What if he tried it on? Just for a second. Just to see. He wouldn't break it. He could be gentle. Just to see. The dress was off the hanger before he could stop himself. He stood in the middle of the room, his suit thrown onto the bed with abandon. The dress slipped over his head, the skirt falling around him like watercolor rain. The golden sun's rays shone through the skirts and painted Con's vision pistachio green for a fleeting moment. Coffee and pistachio might be a good combo, Con considered briefly. He expected the sleeves to be completely filled out and ruined by his muscular arms. He expected the waistband to be too tight and too high. He expected the back to be tight and the seams on the torso to rip. But the fabric slipped over his skin like it was tailored to his measurements, and the dress lost none of its billow from his frame. Turning to glance in the mirror, the skirt swayed with his movement. It fell just above his ankles, small pleats near the top making it fan beautifully. Con stared, first at the dress alone, then at himself. He was wearing a dress, and it looked good on him. It hugged his torso but flared out at the hips, making him look like a belle. The sleeves flowed every time he moved, his arms, creasing in ways that made his arms look pretty. He looked pretty. Was that okay? It felt good. Con turned again, this time just to feel the skirt sway. He smiled as the fabric bobbed, then he turned again, faster this time, twirling with a giddy laugh. Soon, he'd made several circles all in one spot, and the skirts flew and fanned out like a lily pad, and he was the lotus. Why was it nicer than anything he'd ever worn? Why was his smile so wide it ached? Why did he feel like he could cry? The front door clicked open, and Con's blood froze over. Tim knew his boyfriend was not a shy person. He could fly up over a rooftop and proudly belt the lyrics to Mamma Mia, with not a care to who heard or who complained. He could dance like a male bird vying for the attention of a hen in a room full of people, and not even blush. He could talk back to Superman. He could show up to a meeting uninvited. He could face off Lex Luthor. All this to say, Con was hardly ever shy. But hardly ever didn't mean never. There were a few things that Tim had learned about, after years of studying, or getting to know, Con. He was shy about which flowers were his favorites, for whatever reason. Tim knew now it was lavender, because the smell was calming to his enhanced senses, and because he liked how different they looked from most typical flowers. He was shy about family. The topic itself held a lot of grief for him, but the day Tim had said that he thought of Con like family, he'd discovered a new side to the coin. Con was sensitive when he was allowed to be. He was sweet and soft if the environment was right, which it rarely ever was. Which is why Tim went out of his way to make the apartment that place for Con. He'd bought a diffuser for each room of the apartment so that he could make them smell like lavender. He brewed coffee on Saturdays and Sundays to cleanse Con's olfactory senses so he could truly appreciate the scent and not become noseblind to it. He made sure to wash the sheets every time he came by so that they were warm and fresh. And, of course, Tim never wore his suit in Con's space. Because he wasn't there to see Superboy. He was there to see Con, his best friend, his boyfriend. He loved Con, which scared him. But loving Con was like breathing air. So when Tim decided he needed to do something about Con's obvious depression, flowers hadn't come to his mind until the end of the day. He'd spent the whole day picking up the dress, the shoes, and then getting the apartment ready. That he'd forgotten until a few minutes before he knew Con would be home. But maybe that worked out in his favor. Tim knew Con would never try the dress on if he knew Tim was in the apartment. Tim thought as he left the building. Besides, there was a shop just down the street where he could buy a bouquet of flowers and be back in 20 minutes or so. Plenty of time for Con to find the dress and try it on. He really hoped he liked it. He'd gotten it tailored to fit his measurements after he saw Con looking at a similar dress while they were shopping. It had actually been in a bridal shop, clearly as a bridesmaid dress. But the way Con looked at it wasn't the way a man looked at a dress, imagining his girlfriend in it. The longing in Con's eyes had said everything. The material was silk-lined, with fine tulle layering on the sides for a petal-like appearance. Tim had nearly driven himself silly just thinking about Con wearing it. And maybe he had asked the tailor to make the dress open in the back. So what? Sue him. He'd picked out a bundle of sunflowers and lavender before he even realized what he was doing. He paid with a $100 bill and just shook his head dreamily when the woman running the shop gawked and gently said that she couldn't break it. Keep it, he'd murmured in a daze, walking away with a slight spring in his step. He made it all the way back to the apartment building without getting mugged or run over, so that was a win. He scurried up the stairs and quieted his footsteps as he approached Con's door. With his spare key, Tim alerted Con that he was there. Hopefully, he wasn't too freaked out by his sudden appearance. Con? He called as he treaded gently down the hall and towards Con's bedroom. Just as he approached the door, slightly ajar, it was slammed closed with all the violence of a hurricane. Tim jumped back, with wide eyes, nearly dropping the bouquet. Con? Everything okay? Tim asked, pressing his shoulder gently against the door. Yeah, all good, came Con's far too eager reply. Well, can you open the door then? Tim knocked his head against the painted wood, holding the flowers to his side. No, Con shouted, and Tim frowned. Why not? Tim inquired, as Con fumbled behind the confines of his room. He was scrambling, trying desperately to reach the zipper and clasp on the back without ripping the material. It was so beautiful, he couldn't ruin it. Just no. Con didn't have the presence of mind to come up with an actual excuse. He couldn't believe himself. How could he have been so stupid? The dress wasn't his, it was for someone. Someone who wasn't him. He wasn't sure why Tim had hung it in his closet, but that didn't matter. It wasn't his to try on. So why did he... Okay, Tim replied sadly, and Con felt like the worst person alive. Fuck, Tim was here to see him. He should be happy and excited, not shutting him out. Well, do you like the dress I got you? Tim hummed, and Con choked on air. What? What? He echoed his thoughts, utterly lost. The dress in the closet? Did you see it? Tim asked, and Con swallowed painfully. Yeah, Con replied, and took a few steps towards the closet. Do you like it? I saw it and knew I had to get it for you. Thought it would look nice with your skin. Tim spoke casually, as though Con's heart wasn't beating out of his chest. Yeah. You always had an eye for that. Con agreed absently, his head spinning with the fact that the dress was his. It was his. He could wear it. He could... Oh, wow. Did you try it on? Khan asked through the door, and Khan felt his throat stick. He articulated, hands clenching and unclenching into fists. Khan, are you okay? Khan couldn't answer that. How could he answer that? Yes, no, maybe so? Yeah, like that'd work. Khan, baby, is everything alright? Tim's voice got unbearably soft, and Khan sobbed. He couldn't help it. The noise just tore from him, his chest heaving. In a second, the door burst open. Khan had never locked it. Tim spilled in, with wide eyes and a racing heart full of concern. Khan couldn't meet his eyes, wouldn't even turn to face him. Tim saw him standing near the closet, shoulders hunched in. He was wearing the dress, and it looked like it fit him perfectly. He looked lovely in it, but his obvious distress distracted from that. Babe? Tim spoke gently as he approached, a hand outstretched like an olive branch. Another sob, the muscles in his well-defined back tightening. Tim stood directly behind him, just inches away, but not touching. Khan was taller than him by several inches, which meant Tim was at the perfect height to dip his head and kiss the base of Khan's neck. The shiver that jolted through Khan made Tim reconsider his actions, but then he was melting into it, and Tim knew he was accepted. Tim spread a hand over Khan's back and rubbed gently, lips still pressed to the small of his neck. You look beautiful, he said, as he pulled off, only to kiss him again, just an inch lower. Isn't it wrong? Khan sobbed, shoulders right level with his ears. Tim hummed. Does it fit right? He asked, and Khan nodded instantly. Then no, baby. I think it's perfect, Tim whispered, setting his hands on Khan's waist and pulling flush against him. He hooked his chin over Khan's shoulder and rested his cheek against his. Do you like it? Tim asked, as Khan continued to cry silently. His whole frame was shaking. I love it. Khan bit out, just above a whisper. I'm glad. Had it made just for you, Tim admitted, and Khan just cried again, this time letting himself be heard. Knew you wanted one. Wanted your first to be perfect. Tim explained himself, not minding the cool tears wetting his cheek as Khan sobbed. Baby, it's okay, he promised, hugging Khan close. I love you, Khan broke, breaking away from Tim's arms, so that he could turn and face him. Tim was smiling with glossy eyes, gazing upon Khan with more love than anyone had ever looked at him with. I love you too. Tim let himself be pulled back into a proper hug this time, Khan burying his face into Tim's neck. Tim ran a hand up Khan's back, feeling the exposed skin against the silky fabric he'd chosen. You're the prettiest girl in the whole world, and I love you so much, Tim whispered, with conviction, and Khan's breathing stuttered. Say it again, she breathed. You're the prettiest girl in the whole world, baby. Tim promised, and Khan dropped to her knees. Tim followed her, the skirts billowing like the frosting on a fancy cupcake. And I love you so, so much. Tim tacked on, holding her face in his hands and kissing her cheeks and nose lovingly. She sobbed, something between a laugh and a gasp. She felt pretty. She felt loved. Notes. This is based on how I feel when I wear long skirts/dresses, especially with flowy sleeves. I love being a woman. Thanks for reading. And, beginning notes. Woke up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. to write this. Tried to post it, but AO3 was down. This probably has a billion spelling and grammar errors, I'm so sorry. But transgender con? Okay. Transgender con. If you enjoyed this work, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to the author's original work. Leave them many comments and kudos. If you enjoyed my reading, you can subscribe if you want. Or, go down to the comments and tell me what else I should read. Thank you for listening. One of my coworkers was trans femme. So while I was looking for stuff for Pride Month, me and her were chatting and I was complaining about how so many of the trans character fics for DC are porn. When I found this, I very excitedly turned to her because I was looking for fics at work. I had my phone out and I was scrolling through AO3, and I turned to her and was like, I just found a fic where Superboy is trans! That is, Skirt Go Spinny!